Imagine a single block of stone heavier than 300 cars. Now imagine moving it, not a few steps, but across an entire country, and then standing it perfectly upright. No engine, no steel crane, no truck, not even a wheel strong enough to carry the weight. It sounds impossible, and yet, all over the ancient world, people did exactly this again and again for thousands of years. They lifted stones so heavy that even today, with all our machines, we would struggle to move them, so how did they do it? The answer isn't magic, and it certainly isn't aliens. It's something far more impressive: human ingenuity, muscle, and patience on a scale we can barely imagine. This is the story of how people moved the impossible long before the machine. To understand how astonishing this really was, empty your mind of everything in a modern toolbox. No hydraulic lifts, no diesel engines, no steel cable, no forklifts, no cranes. For most of history, the heaviest thing anyone could move was whatever a team of oxen could drag through the mud. And yet the ancient world is scattered with stones weighing tens, even hundreds, of tons, pyramids built from millions of blocks, temples roofed with slabs the size of buses, obelisks carved from a single piece of rock, taller than a modern house. Every one of them had to be quarried, hauled for miles, and lifted into place by hand. The real mystery is not why our ancestors built these things, it's how. Our first clue comes from Egypt, painted on the wall of a tomb almost 4,000 years old. The painting shows a colossal stone statue, a seated figure of a governor named Jotitib, riding on a wooden sledge. Nearly 170 men pull on ropes in neat, straining rows. But the most important figure in the whole scene is the easiest to miss. Standing at the very front of the sledge is a single man, pouring water onto the sand. For a long time, historians assumed this was just a religious ritual. It was not. It was engineering. Dry sand piles up in front of a heavy sledge and jams it to a halt. But wet sand behaves in a completely different way. The water binds the grains together into a firm, smooth surface, and modern physicists have shown that damp sand can cut the pulling force needed almost in half. In other words, with a few jars of water, the Egyptians could move the same giant statue with half as many men. A splash of water on the ground was one of the most powerful machines in the ancient world, and it left no trace but a painting. That humble wooden sledge, dragged over wet sand, timber trackways, or rolling logs, did the heavy lifting of entire civilizations. Where they needed to go higher, they built enormous ramps of earth and brick and simply dragged the blocks up the slope. And to lift a stone that last crucial distance, they used the oldest machine of all, the lever. A stout wooden beam could raise one corner of a block by an inch, just enough to slide a wedge of timber underneath. Lever, pack, repeat, and a stone that no crane on earth could lift would slowly, patiently climb into place. It was slow, it was punishing, but it worked. To see the sheer nerve of these people, travel to a quarry in Aswan in southern Egypt. There, still lying in the bedrock where it was born, is the largest obelisk anyone ever dared to attempt. Had it been finished, this single needle of granite would have stood over 40 meters tall and weighed more than 1,000 tons. Think about that number, 1,000 tons carved from one unbroken piece of stone. The workers were cutting it directly out of the mountain when disaster struck. A crack tore through the granite. In an instant, years of labor were worthless. The obelisk was abandoned on the spot, and it lies there to this day, a 3,000-year-old reminder that even the greatest builders sometimes reached too far. But the giants that did not crack, those, somehow, they moved and raised. Because moving a stone is only half the battle. Standing it upright is far more dangerous and far harder. Jump forward to Rome in the year 1586. An architect named Domenico Fontana was handed a terrifying commission to move an ancient Egyptian obelisk weighing over 300 tons and raise it in the middle of St. Peter's Square. It took months of preparation, nearly 900 men, dozens of horses, and a whole forest of ropes and timber scaffolding. On the day of the raising, the crowd was ordered to keep absolute silence on pain of death so that Fontana's commands could be heard clearly over the strain. And then, as the great stone rose, something went wrong. The ropes began to stretch and smoke under the crushing weight. They were about to snap, and if they did, the obelisk and the men beneath it were doomed. In that frozen moment, one man broke the silence. A sailor named Benedetto Brescia shouted out, "Water on the ropes." He knew, from a life at sea, that wet rope tightens and grips. Buckets were thrown, the rope seized tight, and the obelisk settled safely into place. Instead of being executed for speaking, the sailor was rewarded. A single shout had saved the whole project. If that seems like the limit of what muscle can do, consider what happened 2 centuries later in Russia. Catherine the Great wanted a pedestal carved from one colossal boulder, a stone so vast it was known as the Thunder Stone. It weighed around 1,500 tons. To this day, it remains the heaviest object ever moved by human strength alone. No animals, no engines, nothing but people. Their solution was breathtaking. They built a giant sledge that did not drag at all. Instead, it rolled along a track on top of huge bronze balls. Ball bearings centuries before the machine age. 400 men rolled this mountain of granite across frozen ground, carving it smaller as they went, inch by inch, for 9 long months before floating it the rest of the way on a specially built barge. But not everyone dragged their giants lying down. On Easter Island, one of the loneliest places on the planet, people carved nearly 1,000 massive stone figures, the moai, some weighing dozens of tons. There were no big trees for rollers, no draft animals, no wheels. The islanders always insisted their statues had walked to their places, and outsiders dismissed it as a fairy tale. It wasn't. Modern archaeologists tied ropes to a standing replica and rocked it from side to side, and with every rock it stepped forward, swaying down the road like someone waddling a heavy fridge across a room. A team of just 18 people walked a multi-ton statue 100 meters in 40 minutes. The statues really did walk, and some feats we still can't fully explain. At Stonehenge, the towering sarsen stones weigh around 25 tons each, hauled some 25 kilometers across the land. But the smaller blue stones are stranger still. Geologists have traced them to a range of hills in Wales, more than 200 kilometers away. 5,000 years ago, with nothing but rope, sledges, muscle, and perhaps rafts along the coast, someone moved stones as heavy as elephants across most of a country to raise a circle whose full meaning we still argue about today. Look across all of it, Egypt, Rome, Russia, Easter Island, Britain, and the same truth rises again and again. There was no lost super technology. There were no aliens. There was something far more remarkable, people who understood friction and leverage and the strength of a wet rope. Who could organize hundreds, even thousands, of pairs of hands to pull as one, and who had the patience to move a mountain a few centimeters a day, for months until it was done. We like to picture our ancestors as primitive. But every one of these stones is a message across time, and the message is this: give human beings a lever, a rope, a little water, and a shared goal, and there is almost nothing on earth they cannot move. So the next time you watch a machine lift something heavy, remember the sailors shouting about the ropes, the men pouring water on the sand, and the statues that walked. For most of history, the most powerful machine on earth was simply people working together. If you enjoyed this journey, subscribe, and we'll keep uncovering how people really did the impossible before the modern age.